Welcome to Edimoff channel. We are continuing our series entitled Has the Quran Been Perfectly Preserved? We have seen in our previous two videos how the history surrounding the formation of the Quranic text is far from being pristine. Muslims are claiming the Quran has been perfectly preserved from the beginning. They have one single Quran, unlike the Bible, which has so many versions, and we don't know what the truth is. And today we'll try to answer the second question that we have posed in our first video. If you haven't seen the first video, we invite you to go back to take a look at it. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, we invite you to click that subscribe button so you have access to all the latest video that we are releasing on this channel. This is a spiritual discerning channel which try to take a close look at religions and also provide some truth about the fundamental doctrine of Christianity. That's what sets us apart, and we invite every person who is seeking the truth to come to our channel so we can have this dialogue on an objective basis with respect, with courtesy, so we can treat each other the way we want to be treated. So we are asking the question here in this second video: do the hadiths which are the saying and the practice of Prophet Mohammed during his lifetime, and the commentaries given by Mohammed companion and the Muslim scholar of the first 3 centuries, do they corroborate or do they refute the argument of perfect preservation? We're going to let the Muslim experts speak, not my opinion, not somebody else's opinion, but the opinion of the companion of Prophet Muhammad, of these Muslim scholars that the majority of the Sunni Muslims in the world rely upon. They have trust, and this is why we're relying on what they are saying to address this second question. Now, Muslims rely on a number of surah from the Quran to justify their argument of perfect preservation. They think about Surah 6 verse 115, Surah 15 verse 9, Surah 18 verse 27, and Surah 75 verse 16 and 19, among other surah. But let's read quickly what some of these surah are telling us. Surah 75 verse 16 and 19, using Yusuf Ali's translation, Allah is saying, "Move not thy tongue," speaking to Muhammad, "concerning the Quran, to make haste therewith." So he's telling Muhammad basically, do not rush to recite the Quran. Take your time to memorize it, to learn it. It is for us. So Allah is speaking in plural here. We wonder why there seems to be more than one person involved here, but the Muslims are telling us when God say us, he's speaking as a plural of majesty. But we're going to leave it at it for now. And verse 17 says, "It is for us to collect it, the Quran, and to promulgate it. But when we have promulgated, follow thou its recital as promulgated." Okay? He's telling Muhammad, nay, more. It is for us to explain it and to make it clear. So God says it's our responsibility to explain it, to clarify it, but you just learn to recite it. And if we take another surah, 15 verse 9, Allah is saying, "We have without doubt sent down the message," which is the Quran, "and we will assuredly guard it from corruption." So Muslims, on the basis of these Qurans, are claiming the Quran, there is not one even single word or comma which is missing from the preserved word of Allah, which is, according to them, a miracle. They consider that it to be a miracle. But we saw in the second video that some verses were memorized by only one single person. They could only retrieve that memorization from one single witness. Zayd ibn Tab is reporting 2 verses. Surah 9 verse 128, 129, the last 2 verses of Surah 9, and Surah 33 verse 23. He could only find it with one person, Huzaima bin Thabit al-Ansari. Now, can you rely on the testimony of one person. The Bible is telling us it's impossible. In Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 6, the Bible says, at the mouth of two witnesses or three witnesses shall he that is worthy of death be put to death. But at the mouth of one witness he shall not be put to death. So you cannot establish a fact on the basis of one witness. But in today's Quran, in Surah 9 verse 128-29 and Surah 33 verse 23, only one single person had remembered these verses that Muhammad has revealed. But yet Muslims are using it as the word of God, as a revelation from Allah. Can we rely on that? And that's the question we're asking Muslims. Furthermore, Muhammad himself, his revelation, he received them on a cave and he was by himself. There's no other witness. In the Bible, we have stories after stories. The Apostle Paul, when he was on the road to Damascus, he was approached, seen by Jesus Christ. He met Jesus Christ and he was with other people. They could see, they could hear something, but they could not understand what he was talking about, because only Paul heard what he was saying, but there were people around who saw what happened, who were eyewitness. You take the prophet Daniel, same thing. When he was receiving his vision, his revelation, sometimes he was surrounded with some other people around him, but they could not hear what God was revealing through his angel or through other people, but Daniel or Apostle Paul could hear that. And that attests to the veracity of the revelation of God. Nothing like compared to the Quran. And as a matter of fact, the Quran itself, making the claim you cannot establish a fact with one witness. Let's read in Surah 2 verse 282. This is what the Quran says. O ye who believe, talking about Muslims, when you contract a debt, this is about a debt for a fixed term, recorded in writing. But if he who owned the debt is of low understanding, okay, or weak, or unable himself to dictate, then let the guardian of his interest dictate in terms of equity, and call two witnesses from among your men. Two witnesses. The Quran is even saying call two witnesses when you're writing a contract. Okay, when somebody owed you something, and if two men be not at hand, if they're not available, then choose a man and two women. Now notice here, why not another woman? It seems like one woman, two women is equal to one man. What does that say about the status, how the woman is viewed according to this surah here? It doesn't seem like they put on an equal footing, unlike some of the claim that we hear from Muslims that women are treated equally. Here, one man corresponds to two women. But we will leave it at that. Of such as you approve as witnesses, so that if the one err through forgetfulness, the other will remember. Even the Quran established that. But how come they don't apply the same principle when it comes to these two verses in the Quran today that are in their Quran, but only one witness was able to remember those verses? Not that a second compilation during the reign of Uthman, who asked to copy, to have a copy of Hafsa that he has kept at the death of her father, who is Omar, the second caliph. And I remind you that Hafsa was the widow of Prophet Mohammed. Okay? And she had the first copy of the Quran that was compiled under Abu Bakr order by the same Zayd ibn Tab. Okay? He came the third caliph after the death of Omar, the second caliph, Uthman, who instructed Zayd ibn Tab and three other Qurayshi to compile another second version of the Quran. If the Quran has been perfectly preserved, why Zayd ibn Tab, the third caliph, does he need another compilation of the Quran? And you will notice, as we said in our previous video, after they compile the second Quran version, they destroy and burn every other Quranic compilation, every other fragment of text, especially, I'm sure, if they disagree with what Zayd ibn Tab had in his version. And under this circumstance, Muslims are still claiming the Quran has been perfectly preserved. Their own Muslim scholars are claiming that was not the case when they were compiling, because they destroyed other codices. In particular, Mohammed had mentioned 4 authorities when you come to recitation of the Quran. Mohammed said, if you want to learn the Quran, learn it from these 4 experts. Abdullah ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b and 2 others. And Abdullah ibn Masud was from Kufa, Iraq, and that's why in that area only was circulating his version, his compilation of the Quran. And if you take Ubay ibn Ka'b, he was from Syria. Also in his region, that version of the Quran was circulating, and they are different from each other and from the Uthmanic text as well. How can we talk about perfect preservation under these conditions? Now let's go through a number of hadiths that have missing verse or missing surah. I'm talking about specifically, these are missing from today's Quran, but Muslims are still telling us the Quran has been perfectly preserved. And this is narrated by Ibn Abbas, and this is Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, book 61, hadith 527. Write it down. Ibn Abbas was the cousin of Prophet Muhammad, and he was a theologian who was making commentary on the surah, on the Quran, 114 surah. Tafsir, what we call tafsir. And this is what he said. Omar, the second caliph, said, Ubay, notice here Ubay ibn Ka'b, one of the 4 expert in Quranic recitation that Muhammad has identified, and none of them, notice, had been used by the 3rd caliph to compile the Quranic text. Why? So he is disobeying the Prophet Muhammad, who identified 4 people, and he chose none of those 4 people to compile the Quranic text. One problem that I would like Muslims to give us answers to that. He said, was the best of us in the recitation of the Quran, yet we leave some of what he recited. Notice what he's saying. Ubay ibn Ka'b was the best reciter of the Quran, yet we did not include in the Quran, this is the 2nd caliph speaking, in some of what he was reciting. And he's saying, Ubay said, I have taken it from the mouth of Allah's messenger. So these are revelations that he received from the Prophet Muhammad, and will not leave it for anything whatsoever. But Allah said, none of our revelation do we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, but we substitute something better or similar. This is the issue of abrogation, and we're going to leave it aside for now. We'll come back to it. The question we just have for Muslim for now, how can Allah, if he's omniscient, how can he make a revelation and abrogate that revelation? It doesn't make sense. Why would you share that revelation with mankind when you know that revelation will be abrogated, will be annulled, and replaced by some new revelation? That doesn't make sense. But we'll come back to that later on when we talk about the abrogation in the Quran. 2 more chapters are missing from today's Quran. And this is Sahih Muslim. Now, Muslim was an imam also from the 9th century, 200 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad. He also collected some saying and practice from Prophet Muhammad, and it's written down in something called Sahih Bukhari. And these are authentic hadiths. That's why I'm focusing on that. Okay? He's saying in book 5, hadith 2286. This is what he's saying. Abu Harb Abu al-Aswad reported on the authority of his father that Abu Musa, who was a companion of the Prophet, al-Ashari, sent for the reciters of Basra. Basra is in Iraq. Okay? They came to him, and there were 300 in number. So 300 reciters of the Quran came from Basra to see him. They recited the Quran in front of him, and he said, "You are the best among the inhabitants of Basra." He's complimenting them. "For you are the reciters among them. So continue to recite it. But bear in mind that your reciting for a long time may not harden your heart. as were hardened the heart of those before you. Maybe some Muslim who used to recite the Quran, now they left Islam, maybe for whatever reason, they're not reciting the Quran the same way because they hardened their heart. And then he said, we used to recite a surah which resemble, this is a companion of Prophet Muhammad, in length and severity to Surah Barat. This is Surah 9 again, which is Surah Al-Tawbah, the repentance, which has 129 verses. Notice that. He say, we used to recite a surah, but it's no longer in the Quran which is being recited. He say, I have, however, forgotten it. He forgot the surah. This is a companion of the Prophet, with the exception of this which I remember out of it. So he only remember one verse. He say, if there were two valleys full of riches for the son of Adam, he would long for a third valley, and nothing would fill the stomach of the son of Adam but dust. Notice what he's saying. Now let me tell you here what Muslims use as argument to say, oh no, he only forgot the verses in the surah, but those verses are now in the Quran. Completely false. This surah that he's citing, that this is the only verse he remember, is not in the Quran. So that's a proof that the surah he's talking about is not in today's Quran. So it's missing forever. And we're asking Muslims, under these conditions, how can you say the Quran has been perfectly preserved when there are missing verses in the Quran that we have today? Let's continue. He hasn't finished yet. He said, and we used to recite another surah which resemble one of the surah of Musa Bihat. This is a couple of surah that is combined and called Musa Bihat. And I have forgotten it, but remember this much. He also forgot this surah, but this is what he remembered out of it. O people who believe, why do you say that which you do not practice? And it is in Surah 51 verse 2. We have something similar. And that is recorded in your neck as a witness against you, and you would be asked about it, on the day of resurrection. And that's Surah Surah 17 verse 13. Okay, this also, some of this is in another surah, but this is a different surah. He's talking about a different surah, and he remember only some verses which are similar to these verses in the actual Quran. Okay, a third point, and this is Aisha, the preferred wife of Prophet Muhammad and the mother of all the believers, as she is called. There were two verses on stoning and adult breastfeeding, and Aisha confirmed they are missing from today's Quran. Let's read from Sunan Ibn Majah. Okay, this is another authority of Islam, volume 3, book 9, Hadith 144. Write it down. He said it was narrated that Aisha said, the verse of stoning and of breastfeeding an adult 10 times was revealed, and the paper was with me under my pillow. So you notice that some of these revelations were on papers. Okay, when the messenger of Allah died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came in and ate that paper which contained that verse on stoning, because that verse used to say that if somebody commit adultery, he need to be stoned. But actually today in the Quran, whatever is referred to if you commit adultery, that verse is no longer there, and it's something else they're giving as instruction when you commit adultery. And this is what Islam has in terms of companion of the Prophet, in terms of Muslim scholars revealing how the Quran, the Quranic text was revealed. And you can see this is far from a text that is being perfectly preserved. We're going to stop here, and in the following video, we'll give you some more information about these Muslim scholars that are recognized by the majority of the Muslims today, which are claiming that the preservation, the history of the formation of the Quran is far from being perfect. There's a lot of hole in the narrative, as some contemporary Muslim scholar would say. And we're going to go through that and look at those holes. Thank you for your attention. May God bless you, and stay tuned.
And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. Okay? This is what I'm going to say.